welcome to Louisiana Heartbeats. I'm Cindy Landry, and again today on our show we have a guest that we would like to feature, Jan Risher. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Listen, everybody in the world seems to know about you but me, so I'm kind of nosy, so I'm going to ask all these questions for those like me out there that don't know how just busy of a lady you really are, the many hats that you wear. I was so fascinated by everywhere that you've been, the stories that you've told, and now the books that you're writing, and also in between all this, you were teaching also. So there's a lot of before and afters. Today, thank you so much, Facebook, for tuning in. If there's any information that you hear today on the show, all you have to do is shoot us an email. We'll get you that answer or connect you with Jan, and she will be tagged with this show a little bit later on after it's all finished. And first of all, I would like to bring and start the show with the fact that Jan has so many hats. I mean, I read where she was a journalist, an investigative reporter, freelance writer, world traveler, and then as you can see on our graphics, writer, newspaper, columnist. Let me tell you, columnist.
Columnist, not a communist, but a columnist.
Not communist. Today, my mouth. Sorry, I have a dry mouth. Before you read what we said, and thanks to Jan, that was cute. Thanks to Jan, I was going to correct that. She too is a little under the weather, but we're going to get through the show. Meanwhile, just a few facts, and then I'll let Jan share the rest. Jan grew up in the middle of Mississippi with a family full of storytellers. At the beginning of the show, I was sharing with Jan how, it's amazing. I was also from Mississippi, but not raised there. But a lot of storytellers seem to come out of Mississippi for some reason, I'm noticing. But even though she was born there and she was raised there, she eventually ended up here in Louisiana. And that's the story that's so amazing. And I love the way it's written here, that she eventually made her way to Louisiana, taking the long route to get there with stops in between the mountains of
Slovakia.
And on with the tribal village in you better say all this.
Burkina Faso.
And the hills of central Mexico, and Reno, Nevada, Washington, D.C., El Paso, Texas, and more. Wow. So you really did. I'm sorry, the song came in my head was, I've been everywhere, man.
I haven't been everywhere, but
It sounds like you've been pretty far. But through all of this, okay, we had seen earlier that in the writing that I had looked up on you, there were a lot of things you did before you actually became a freelance writer. Would you like to share that? You're traveling, just like Google said, you've been through the different places.
Well, I grew up in Mississippi.
Yes.
And in Forest, Mississippi, which is in the middle of the state. Though I graduated from high school in McGee, Mississippi. I like to shout out to McGee. My dad was a high school principal in McGee. And then I went to Mississippi State, and I actually got a degree in English education. I started off majoring in public relations, but in my freshman year of college, I thought, anything that I could do with a public relations degree, I could also do with an English education degree. But with an English education degree, I could always teach. And I'm so glad I made that change, because I have fallen back to teaching. Not that I think it's one of the most noble professions out there, but it did allow me to travel the world. I've been a lot of places. I've been to 48 countries, and hoping to visit a few more this summer. But teaching English is part of how I got to all those places.
So teaching English, okay, and traveling to, you also shared that also too, that I think you even taught at ULL at one point, or still is.
No, when we first moved here, I taught English as a second language.
You know what, I don't understand that, so would you clear that up for us? Because it sounded kind of different and odd when it was put down on paper. You taught it as a second language, okay, for people who did not know.
International students who want to come here and study biology or engineering, whatever. But they're super smart folks. But just like if you perhaps were going to go study in Japan,
I would need to.
You'd need to learn Japanese well.
Well,
And
the
so
most
they
important
come
thing
here.
is internationally. That's the thing that makes the difference as to what language. Okay. Now you mentioned in the notes earlier that I had prepared to ask you. We're going to be kind of not going exactly in order, but I'm going to ask. Okay, after you got to Louisiana, all right, what was the first thing or first employment you had? Do you remember?
Yeah, we moved here in late 2001.
Okay.
And my job at UL, I can't remember. I started at UL and writing my column for the newspaper about the same time, just a couple months after we moved here, which would have been in early 2002.
2002.
And
yes.
I started writing a column for the Daily Advertiser, and I also at that time was reviewing restaurants for the Daily Advertiser. And in the first 6 or 7 months that we lived here, I reviewed 101 local restaurants.
I'm not surprised. Okay. Now, I noticed whenever under the category about the book, and the book that you're in front of you right now that's on the screen in the back, let's give the viewing audience a little bit of knowledge of what this book is about.
Well, this is a book that, because I did start writing my column for the Advertiser in 2002, March 2002, and I wrote for the Advertiser every single week, every Sunday, from March 2002 until January earlier this year when I moved to the Advocate in February. And so this is what I jokingly refer to as Jan Risher's greatest hits from 2002 to 2017. So it covers 15 years. It's arranged in chronological order. I work with a team of about 8 editors to go through, because that's a lot of columns.
Yes, I
It's
can
more
only
than 800
imagine.
columns,
Yes.
and so we picked, I think there are about 135 or so of our favorites in here.
Well, I tell you what, after reading what I read, then I was interested in checking it out even further. It was so interesting. Just right now it says that the collection creates a narrative of one woman's aim to build her family, build up her community, and weave the stories and lessons learned from the past into the present. That'd be you.
That would be me. I would be that one woman.
Well, let me tell you what, a lot of people do know and are aware of you, Jan, and it's exciting to find out all this information. Being the president of the Writers Guild of Acadiana, I'm always interested in sharing with other people, whoever's talent, like you, for example, have agreed to be our guest speaker for the month, this month, in fact, coming to the end of the last Tuesday of the month, which this month is March, so you'll be our guest speaker. So I'm excited, and after I had printed up all this stuff and presented it to the board, it was like, yes, let's get her in here, and yes, maybe she could do a workshop for us later. I said that'll be up to Jan. You can talk
Be
to her
happy
about
to.
that.
Sure.
And with all the things that you have to share, you know, you mentioned that you did change over. Have you recently, where have you been recently in sharing this information about this book for sure? Long story short.
Oh, I've been, I actually
Locally?
Locally. I actually did a workshop recently at Barnes & Noble on memoir writing.
All right.
And that was a lot of fun. Enjoyed that. And around the holidays, just before the holidays, I did a book tour in Mississippi. And I did a lot of appearances here locally as well, talking about the book and just trying to pull the different themes out of the book. You know, good writing, I think everyone can find themselves in good writing. And
I totally agree, and I'm amazed at the information just with you that you are so willing to share among the busy, so many things that you're involved in. For example, okay, so you just happen to go to China and adopt a little daughter on the way back?
No.
Okay.
No. We,
I bring that up for a reason. Go ahead.
no, it took 3 years to do all the paperwork to adopt our daughter from China, and it was a very focused journey. That was why we went to China.
Well, the reason I jokingly brought that up, but now serious business, the book that you have created is going to be so helpful to those who do want to adopt internationally. And so your trials and all that, now your joys, you can share that with these people, and they can be prepared to be prepared, right? Right.
And adopting internationally is a little bit different now than when we adopted in 2002. It's a little bit more complicated, but certainly the journey has the similar themes.
You know what I love? It says author Jan Risher attempts, sometimes failing and sometimes succeeding, to do her small part to make the world a better place. Isn't that a wonderful feeling when you know you made a difference with somebody doing something and sharing? I'm that kind of person also. If I know something that's going to help somebody else avoid things that maybe they don't have to avoid from the lessons I've learned, I'm so willing to share. And I know that the ones who have picked up your merchandise appreciate what you've done in sharing.
Wow. I hope so.
I just want to say thank you very much. I know one thing, that just me reading what I've read, it is very amazing, the journey that you've been on and the journey that you're on right now. And so with that said.
One thing that I have that's interesting that's coming up, I recently won a fellowship, and I'm going to Wyoming for a month. I'm leaving mid to late April. I won, it's called the Brush Creek Arts Fellowship. And so they pick 8 artists from all over the world.
Wow.
And there are 4 visual artists, 2 musicians, and then 2 literary artists. And they will be on a 30,000-acre ranch.
What?
And each one of us has a little cabin that I guess is an old cabin that they've renovated. And we will, no expectations. They bring us all of our food, and all we have to do is just create. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, that is such a blessing and a huge reward for hardworking people like you.
I'm very excited.
What is that date? I guess so. What is that date?
I leave Lafayette April the 24th, and I get back May the 22nd. So I'll be
you're going to
very
have
excited.
a lot to share with us later on.
Well,
huh?
I mean, my goal while I'm gone is to write a piece of fiction, a novel.
Okay.
And so I'm working to be prepared, but I love a deadline. I was a journalist for a long time, and nothing inspires quite like a deadline. So knowing that I've got a very compact amount of time to hopefully finish something is really exciting to me.
That's an interesting point to bring up, because there's so many writers that I come in contact with that it keeps procrastinating, keeps saying they're going to do, but they don't seem to have a schedule. And you're right, when you have a schedule, you're going to do what you need to do daily, hourly, whatever.
Right.
So that is good. Now, that brings me up too. I understand that you do have a business, and that you also liked helping authors learn how to market their own materials, and you share with them tips. Could you share a little bit about how you tend to want to help authors? Like, it's hard to get out there and market your stuff if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard to market yourself in the best scenario possible. So my business is called Shift Key, and we make communication capital, like the Shift key on the keyboard makes letters capital. And so we have a package, actually, because I love working with authors, and we help them come up with a plan. A lot of times people work so hard to get their book ready that that's all they're focused on, like the release date, release it as soon as possible, which that's not the thing to do. Remember that. You have to have a whole marketing plan, because you have a small window of time when you can get attention for your writing or something new that's published. And so we help writers come up with those plans, and speaking opportunities and book signing opportunities and workshops. We try to be innovative and come up with different ideas.
Well, it sure caught my attention, and it would be so appreciated, because it's devastating to me. I'm a published author, and everything that was told to me, I thought I had to go for it. I didn't think I had the right to question. I learned a lot, but what I went through has helped other people avoid and, think more about details and all that. And you're so right. There's nothing more devastating, Katiana, than a person who has a great story that goes out there and puts their trust in someone who's not as dedicated, as far as really wanting to do the best for the author themselves. And like I said, as president of the Writers Guild, it's so sad to see so many people who get used and abused. But it's not just the person doing the work. It's because they jumped into it just like all of us authors, beginners that haven't been to college to learn how to do it the right way. We
I'm not
automatically-
sure college teaches
Well,
you how
that's
to do it the
another
right
thing
way.
too, but any kind of learning, we just know it's a good story and we believe in that story and maybe other people, just because it's a good story and it's an awesome story doesn't mean it's going to sell out there. And that's where people in other areas are qualified to help us. So I'm very interested in, of course, contacting you later for more information and sending you an email
Sure.
with questions from the Writers Guild, and people will respond from there. But that is so needed. Now, I cannot believe, Barnes & Noble, shame on you. I'm always wondering how in the world things come up that I don't know about, and even though I pick up the calendar, it seems to be always outdated. So I'm going to check with Barnes & Noble on this, because that's one workshop a lot of us would have loved to have attended. So, but I love Barnes & Noble. They allow us to meet there and have for over 30 years.
Yeah, and I believe it was on their calendar, and I put it out on social media, and we had a nice little response, and it was a really fun workshop.
Well,
and we can do it again.
And I know that they give us all opportunities to do that. So I will definitely find out how I can be a part of sharing, and I have a big mouth, so that I can do. I can share. Anyway, but kudos to Barnes & Noble, and I'm so glad you were out there, and maybe we can get
that's
something
good.
else going. Okay, backing up, also too, you co-authored a book. What is this book about that you
Teen
co-authored?
Renaissance.
Yes.
I co-authored it with a man named Richard Spoon, and he is a businessman and business consultant. And it really is a business book. It's about teams working together most effectively and efficiently. And so it's got a business model of how teams can work together better.
Well, I learned a new word, business writer, and what the difference is. We even had Googled it on the way over here. And Google actually had some great information. What is a business writer? That's what you are too.
Yeah, and that's really a lot of what my business does as well.
Excuse me.
What the internet's changed everything, and one of the things the internet changed the most is the world of publishing. And whereas we used to have to wait for traditional media to publish news, now businesses can tell their own stories. And so in the last decade, some businesses have figured out that maybe it's better to let people who actually know how to tell stories tell our story, rather than someone who's already in the organization who just knows the business. So we work with businesses to tell their stories and get their stories out there.
So for more information, they can email you at the email address on the screen, and have the questions ready, and at your convenient time, you will respond.
Sure.
Now, you are a award-winning journalist. Okay, and what did you win that award for, or awards? How many?
I'm not sure how many, but one thing that we
You've
won
been
some
blessed mightily, that's for sure, and hard work.
Hard work for sure. But one thing that we won an award for back in 2004, 2005, a writer named Kayla Gagne and I went down to Vermilion Parish, to Cow Island, and we literally went door to door collecting water samples and figured out that there was probably a connection between some problems that they were having health-wise and arsenic, a higher than normal arsenic level in some of the water. And we did lots of work on it and figured out that they used to have these things called cow dips. Do you know what a cow dip is?
Wait a minute, I read something, but go ahead and say it.
It's cow dips when they dig a big hole in the ground and they would fill it with like a sludge, basically an arsenic sludge.
Oh, yeah.
And they would have the cows walk through it and to kill ticks and
wow.
other pests. And so then they would just leave the sludge, and the water table in Vermilion Parish is pretty high, and they think that perhaps some of that arsenic sludge seeped into the water. So we won some big awards for that work. And,
Wow, you're just one amazing, interesting lady.
And the
all right?
state ended up coming in and putting in, public water lines. Before they had private family wells. So that's one award I won, and then some others for columns.
Yes, okay, now let's talk about the, okay, so you're now at a new location, and we have 4 minutes left in the show. You're now at a new location for another newspaper, and what did your column about?
My column's still about, it's still called Long Story Short.
Okay.
And it's about different things. This past week, I think this past week was about metal detecting. I went out metal detecting with a university professor, and I just try to write about interesting people and telling my own stories and interesting things.
Well,
you
I
never know.
guarantee I'd like to comment on this. I love your twist on unusual names and unusual topics. And yet, when you write this, which I'm beginning to read and be able to follow, I'm like, wow, I never thought about it like that. So that brings me to this new podcast,
Right.
The Virtual Casserole.
Right.
It's not food.
It's not about food. It's just my friend Linda Halfacre Ware and I started the Virtual Casserole last year, and it's just a podcast about life in general. And you know how you feel when you're sick and somebody brings you a casserole. It makes
Yes.
you feel all warm and fuzzy. And the idea is that by listening to the podcast, you can have the virtual casserole experience.
And yeah, for someone to be able to listen to it, where would they have to check it out on what,
It's
Facebook
on all
or what?
No, it's on like Apple, iTunes,
Okay.
and all the
Okay, it's on the
podcast space.
iTunes apps, okay. Well, that's very interesting. That's the first I'd heard of it today. Now, before we get into the very end of the show, Jan, is there anything that you're working on or your dreams, or what are you doing next, if you can share with us?
Well, the next thing I'm doing is really about the fellowship that I'm going
Okay,
to,
which you
Wyoming,
mentioned it, okay.
and working on the piece of fiction, which, you know, I've written a lot of nonfiction, but fiction's going to be different for me.
Okay, and 2 minutes left into the show, and not fiction. You're so used to reporting true nonfiction. You're gonna try that workshop you're going to?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you'll have no problems with that. Well, I want to thank Katie Ann of Facebook for tuning in also, even though we're not finished yet. And I want to invite different people to check out the information that you have shared on this television show today. And I sure want to say thank you so much for coming in and working with us, and I hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you so
did
much.
terrific.
Well,
you
thanks.
haven't had too much of a problem. Now, this is an intriguing book. The book on the background that's actually like a little map of everywhere you've been. Did you draw that, or someone
No,
else?
this is actually a map of the different paths of the Mississippi River. It was created in 1944 by a man named Harold Fisk. It's public
Okay.
domain. And I liked it because it's a metaphor for, you know, our lives change routes depending on different forces out there, just like the Mississippi River changes routes. And since I'm from Mississippi but now live in Louisiana, the Mississippi River connects the two. So
I thought you'd drawn that yourself.
I did
just
not.
automatically would have thought you would have done that too.
Did not, no.
No. Well, you've interviewed a lot of people, I noticed on Facebook, and you've interviewed authors, which I surely appreciate that also too. In the process, they have said how so professional you are, and I'm thinking, yes, and I have the opportunity for her to come on my show. So I almost said, why don't you just interview me and get it over with? Because I'm thinking, okay, I printed everything out anew, and that I could learn. Is there anything that we definitely could talk about? I know this is an old post on Google about the Feel Good Festival. What was that about?
The Feel Good Festival was in August of 18,
Yeah.
and it was just about trying to help people feel good, and we had lots of fun events throughout Lafayette and Acadiana, including a community sing-along, lots of fun things, and so we'll have to see if we'll do it again this August.
Well, it sounds good because this is 2019, and the rolling credits are coming in right there, which is letting us know it's the end of the show. And thank you so much for coming on again, and thank you, Acadiana, for allowing us to be on this this show, which is courtesy of Acadiana Open Channel, a community show that lets a person come in here and share their dreams, their visions, and we're able to showcase people and help them promote themselves out there. So again, be blessed, keep writing, and if you're interested in coming on the show, then let me know. Shoot me an email or call AOC, something. And meanwhile, thank you, Jan, again for coming in.
Thank you.